everybody. Welcome to episode 24 of the News Just News Weekly Roundup. I'm your host for today, Lucia, and I am once again joined by the wonderful Anna.
Hi, guys.
And by the amazing Adam. Hello, Adam.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone, again. So we are going to talk about a lot of things today, once again. And just a reminder, you can find all the stories that we're going to discuss today on our website, newsjustnews.com. And we are covering entertainment today, but on the website, you will be able to find stories about politics, sports, society, and even some capybara stories as usual. So you can just head there and read whatever you prefer. And we are starting today with, we are going to talk about the king of pop, but for the time being, we're calling maybe like the princess of pop, Taylor Swift. Anna, would you like to tell us something about her today?
Yes, so there's a lot going on with Taylor. First of all, she had a New York Times interview, but we're not going to be talking about that today. Today, we're going to be talking about two trademark applications that she has filed. The two applications she filed were two audio clips, one being, "Hey, it's Taylor," and "Hey, it's Taylor Swift." They're like AI-generated voice overviews, whatever, and there's also an image of herself from the Eras tour in her sparkly outfit and a pink guitar. So she's doing this to kind of protect her voice and her image from deepfake videos and audios, because we've been seeing that a lot with Taylor. I don't know if you guys have seen, but especially with Donald Trump and fake political endorsements, Taylor has been unfortunately involved in that with the AI aspect. And then it's also just general false advertising and also pretty explicit images that have been made of her, which we haven't seen amongst many celebrities and public figures, which is disgusting. So I hope we can get some progress on that. But yeah, I mean, if you go into the whole basis of like media copyright law, I mean, artists have always used copyright law to protect their recorded music, but now with AI complications, it kind of makes things different, and it kind of creates a gap that trademarks could possibly fill. So we've seen this. Taylor's done it now, but Matthew McConaughey, he also did the same. He filed 8 successful trademarks, and they haven't been tested yet, but both on Taylor and Matthew, the legal theories behind it are reportedly very strong. So yeah, it lends to the whole discussion of what is the future when it comes to AI and people impersonating celebrities and figures when it comes to political endorsements, advertising, terrible deepfake videos and images. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that aspect, but we'll see what happens with Taylor. The applications have gone through. We'll see what happens. But we're kind of standing on the cusp of, AI regulation law and deepfake stuff. So this is really cool. Obviously not great for her, but in terms of media law, it's interesting.
I feel like with Taylor specifically, when you reach a certain, state of greatness, at least, she's always been kind of like eager to protect her image and her voice, and also her production. Even the whole thing that was happening a few years ago with Scooter Brown and the rights to, her music. Obviously, she's always been very open about it. I think this is a good choice because with everything that is happening with AI, yeah, it's very scary, and it's just terrifying to think that someone could literally create an image of you and like your voice and use it for whatever they want. What do you think, Adam, about this? Have you heard about the story?
Yeah, so I mean, we are definitely entering a sort of weird time. I'm glad that because it's a novel idea of trademarking your voice. So it's still not tested. So, but it's definitely a good way to protect yourself because we're entering a time now where AI. I don't know about you guys, but I always, you can sort of tell, but there are times when I will glance at a video and I won't even realize it's AI. We are getting to that point where even if you are trained, obviously like we are, we know what AI is. We're not, random people on Facebook, but even then it's just so, I don't know, I don't want to use the word accurate, but it's so, you can be deceived by it. And I mean, it's I do think, there are ways. So I know YouTube, I was reading on News Just News, an article about YouTube, and they're expanding their AI detection, so their deepfake detection. So you'll be able to register, like for celebrities and companies, they can register, and then YouTube will search through videos and look for AI. I don't really know how they do it, but I do think, there should be, in certain places, I know it's been talked about as well, that you should have basically every AI, like AI video or text, it should somehow show that it's AI generated. And I kind of agree, because I think we do need a balance as well. Because I don't love, but those songs where the covers by different artists, like what this song would sound like if it was sung by this person. Like, what if Dolly Parton sang, I don't know, one of Michael Jackson's songs, and it's like, it's cool to hear, but then obviously with things like this and copyright, I do think, is it in a weird way stifling, a little bit of creativity? Like, should people's voices, how will it work with remixes, and when people want to sample things, how will it work with that? So I guess, it's like Anna said, we just got to see, well, whether this will stand up in court, and what else Taylor might go after. Will she go after samples and such things?
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like you've made a very interesting point when you said that it's very difficult now to see the difference. And I mean, we all witnessed, the beginning of AI, I feel. And at the beginning, when you saw that video of, was it Will Smith eating that plate of spaghetti, was it something like that? You could really tell that it was AI. But now it's impossible, even though you've got like a trained eye. And I feel like there are some websites, I think X, so what used to be Twitter, sometimes you see videos and it will say that it's AI, but some of the times it won't, and it's very difficult to recognize. So it's quite scary to me, at least. Speaking of AI, or some connection to it, Adam, would you like to talk about the Disney movie that has ASL in it?
Yeah, so I mean, I should obviously preface, this isn't AI. There was accusations of AI, because I'm sure someone somewhere tried to make this, but basically Disney have come out with some iconic songs using American Sign Language, ASL. So the Next Right Thing from Frozen 2, We Don't Talk About Bruno from Encanto, and Beyond from Moana 2. So it's part of their Songs in Sign Language project for National Deaf History Month in the US. So, and these were all animated, by real animators. They had to, rechange some of the scenes, and they got a deaf choir in, the LA-based deaf choir, Deaf West Theatre, to, they got the performers in to see how it would look, how they'd look dancing, and then they animated those movements. So it's really cool. And this was done by Hiram Osmond, and his father was deaf, but he never learned sign language. So this was sort of a way for him. He said it's a way for him to connect with deaf people, and it's so good. I've seen the videos. It's like, you got the music, you got the sign, and it's so good that Disney is doing this for, a different, or for kids, obviously, and for deaf children, they can enjoy it too. And it's not AI, it's done by real animators, which is so cool.
That is really amazing. Have you seen anything, Anna, about it?
Yes, I have. And I think this is some of the best news that I've seen this year, to be honest. I mean, we often, I find, we live in quite an ableist society, and this is the type of thing that can bridge that gap. And I'm just so happy about it. I do think ASL in general should be something that everyone needs to learn, whether that be in high school or university. I'm so pleased about it, and I agree with you, Adam. I mean, it's great for deaf children and even adults alike just to enjoy it, and it's just such an inclusive and beautiful initiative. I am it really warmed my heart when I saw it, and I hope that they do it more with other songs. I also really loved the care that they put into it, especially bringing in that choir and seeing how they move when they use ASL. So they didn't just kind of do it, oh, let's just do this for Deaf History Month. No, they wanted to really put that proper care into it, and it's very commendable. And yeah, I think it's something to be celebrated.
I agree. I think it's a really good choice, and absolutely, I agree as well that we all should learn ASL in, even if it's our language. Obviously, I will be learning it in Italian. You guys will be learning in American English or British English, and I think it's just a really useful resource that everyone should have. And speaking of movies, we are now passing to something else that has been really talked about in the past couple of weeks. Last weekend, the Michael Jackson biopic came out. It was released in the cinemas, and it was a massive success. Have you guys seen it yet?
Not yet.
No.
Are you thinking about seeing it, or is it something that's not completely in your interest?
I've never, I mean, he's the king of pop, but he's never been my king of pop, dare I say, he's before my time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Adam. But I mean, I would love to see it just for general interest. But I think Lucia will get into it now. There has been some mixed reviews, which make me hesitate to going forward with that.
Yeah, so the movie has grossed a lot of money up until now. As of this weekend, it had grossed $270 million. Out of those, almost 100 million were domestically, so in the US and in Canada. And that is the biggest weekend opening ever for a biopic, which I think is insane. Obviously, I was expecting it to be, very successful just because of how popular Michael Jackson was and is, but I didn't expect it that much. Like, if we consider the comparison with when Bohemian Rhapsody was released, the Queen movie, it grossed like half of that amount, and this is just the first weekend, so it's a really insane amount of money. What we know about the movie is that it covers just the first portion of Michael Jackson's career. And for that reason, and because of the success that it had, the director has already talked about a potential sequel, which is also very interesting because I think with this kind of movies, we usually don't tend to see sequels. Like, I'm thinking, for example, about the Elton John one. It covered quite a good chunk of his career, but it was a very limited movie on a certain portion of his career. Or many Beatles biopics, for example, Nowhere Boy, only covered the teenage years of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. So it was kind of limited in time. In this case, it seems like it follows Jackson's rise to fame, and then potentially the second part could be on, his later years as a performer and as a, world famous star. We know that this film specifically has been pushed a lot by the Jackson estate. And obviously the actor playing Michael Jackson is his nephew, Jafar Jackson. So that's also quite interesting. And the likeness is obviously there. So I think that was a really good choice. However, yes, as you were mentioning, Anna, there has been a lot of controversy around the movie. Even part of his family has been not particularly over supportive about it. His sister, for example, Janet Jackson, is not involved at all in the movie. And Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris, said that it was very like what was represented in the movie was very far from reality, and she called it a fantasy land, which I think was, you know, quite strong, coming from someone who was that close to him. The director and also Lionsgate defended themselves, saying that the reason why, you know, some of the most controversial aspects of Jackson's life are not in the movie is just because they were not part of that part of his career, because the movie apparently only gets to, I think, the end of the 80s, whereas the first allegations of child sexual abuse for Jackson started in the 90s, the early 90s. But obviously this is something that, if they do decide to make a sequel, is going to be addressed inevitably, because it's, you know, such a big part of the later stage of his career, like everything that was going on between the 90s and the 2000s. So it's going to be interesting on how, like, to see how they're going to deal with this, because obviously it's a massive thing and it's doomed to make someone unhappy, either the fans or, you know, the critics. We know that the film has been received really well by the public, but critics were not as happy about it. So we'll see where that's going to go. Yeah. Have you guys ever seen the documentary about his, you know, abuse allegations? Have you ever heard anything of it? I think it came out quite a few years ago now, but it was quite relevant at the time. Have you guys?
I do remember it coming out though, and especially like the allegate. I feel like especially when he died in like 2011, I kind of remember a lot of the talk around then was around the allegations. And yeah, when I was like, you know, looking at about this biopic, and because obviously they did leave it out, but originally it was meant to be in, which I think is very interesting, and they had to rewrite the script. But from what I've seen, it's due to one of the accusers. They have some sort of legal clause, which means they can't be talked about. So I do think it does sort of take the heat off, I guess, the writers and producers of the film. You know, they do sort of have a more valid excuse than to sanitize the movie. But I do think, you know, just because you don't intend to, you know, just because you didn't want to sanitize it with something else doesn't mean, I don't know, there's still something they could do, because that's why I'm so, you know, I'm not a Jackson fan, and this film really seems to me to be a film for fans. So then that's why it doesn't really appeal to me as much.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yes, there is I think there was a reason why they stopped talking about it, for exactly that reason. If I remember correctly, there was during the court sessions, it was said at the time that they were not allowed to speak about what was happening inside of the court for a certain amount of time, and that was why it was excluded from the movie. However, like, as we were saying, it's such a huge part, and if they are going to gloss over it, it's never going to be, you know, even if, you know, he's found innocent or he was found guilty or whatever you want to believe, because it defines so much his career, his, you know, also decline after a certain time, it's quite impossible to just like completely remove it from the story. However, I do think that, as you were saying, like it's a movie made for the fans, and for that reason, they kind of like tend to just like hide under the carpet all of the bad things about a certain star. I'm thinking about, for example, other biopics that we've seen where it was mostly like that, like characters, you know, more than stars, you had characters in the movie, so it was very difficult to make a movie that was completely, you know, true to reality. Are you a fan of music biopics, Anna? Do you usually watch them, and do you have one that you like particularly?
I'm actually not a fan of biopics, to be honest, because I do think there are so many ethical standpoints to look at it, and we've kind of been talking about this throughout the podcast. I mean, first of all, in terms of the Michael Jackson one, first of all, the fact that parts of his family weren't happy with it, and it still went forward. I think the family does have a right to be able to have a say, and a huge say in the script and what is told, and then also in terms of what's said and not said, like you were saying, Adam, it's a movie made for the fans, but does that necessarily mean that they're allowed to gloss over the negative parts, or the parts that may be uncomfortable? Also, on that note, on those uncomfortable parts with the victims, if they were to make a second movie, that is such an issue that we're seeing today with films that don't really address the victims' families or even address the victims themselves, ask for their permission, ask if it's okay, type of thing. We've seen that with, so many crime TV series. So, yeah, I don't think that we should get a second film. I think it should stay the way it is, a movie for the fans. I may not agree with that, but if the fans like it, which they do, it has an A- on Cinema Score, which is what fans love. But critics, it's 38% on Rotten Tomatoes. So there's so much you can kind of unpack when it comes to biopics, and I think this is a very interesting case to study and look at. So I think we've really delved deep into all of the parts of it today. But yeah, that's how I stand. Yeah.
I agree. I think we shouldn't get a second one. I feel like this one should have been made better, but because we got this version now, that's all we should get. That's, I think, how it should end. Well, thank you both for joining me here today. And once again, you can go on our website, newsjustnews.com, and read all of the stories that we talked about today and many, many more. So thank you, Anna. Thank you, Adam. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.